I used to believe that if I stayed quiet, worked hard, and waited my turn, life would eventually reward me. That my family would see me. That my efforts would matter. But instead of love, I got silence. Instead of encouragement, I got laughter. They called me a burden. Until one day, they needed me more than I ever needed them. This is the story of how I went from being the sister they mocked to the woman they never saw coming. I used to think something was wrong with me. That maybe if I tried harder, smiled more, dressed the way they liked, I'd fit in. That I'd finally be enough for my family. But no matter what I did, it always came back to one thing. I wasn't like my sister. Lauren was the blueprint. The golden one. She was everything a daughter was supposed to be. Pretty, sociable, always had a boyfriend, and later, a husband with a high-paying job. She had the big suburban house with the white pillars out front, 2 kids by 30, a golden retriever, and a perfectly curated life on social media. Every family gathering, someone would bring her up, her latest promotion, her son's soccer trophy, or that magazine feature she did for a local business event. My parents beamed with pride whenever her name was mentioned. And then there was me. Single. Introverted. Quiet. No ring. No kids. Just a weird job in tech. They didn't understand and didn't want to understand. I didn't live in a flashy house. I didn't have time to take selfies with brunch mimosas. I had ideas, big ones. But try telling your traditional parents that you're building a financial literacy platform for women over 50. Their eyes glazed over before I could even finish the sentence. Lauren used to laugh and say, "You know, you'd be happier if you just found a nice guy and stopped trying to be the next Mark Zuckerberg." That one stung. Not because I wanted to be Zuckerberg, but because it confirmed what I always knew. She didn't take me seriously. None of them did. It wasn't always like that. Growing up, I thought Lauren was amazing. She was 4 years older than me, and when I was little, she'd let me borrow her hair clips or sneak candy to me when mom wasn't looking. But the older we got, the more things shifted. Somewhere between middle school and adulthood, Lauren went from being my big sister to my biggest critic. When I graduated college, I was the first in our family to major in computer science. I was so proud. I even got a standing ovation during our senior showcase presentation. But when I came home, the first thing my dad said was, "So, any job offers yet?" And Lauren followed it up with, "Or are you going to keep building those silly apps no one uses?" I laughed it off. Back then, I still thought if I just achieved enough, they'd respect me. At every family holiday or birthday dinner, Lauren would find a way to turn the conversation into a subtle jab. "You still living in that tiny apartment downtown? Still single, huh? You know, men like women who are a little more relaxed. Maybe if you got out of the house more instead of coding all day." It became a running joke. Lauren the success story and me the quirky little sister who still hadn't figured life out. What hurt the most wasn't the comments. It was the way everyone else just laughed along. My mom would smile and say, "That's just how your sister shows love." My dad would roll his eyes and say, "She's just teasing. Don't be so sensitive." But I wasn't being sensitive. I was being dismissed. Still, I kept going. I worked freelance contracts, saved every penny, and started tinkering with ideas for my own business. Nothing fancy, just a quiet vision, something that mattered to me. Meanwhile, Lauren's life was a constant parade of social announcements. Lauren's buying a new SUV. Lauren's daughter got into the private school. Lauren's starting a blog. And every time I saw a new post about her perfect life, a little part of me shrank. I couldn't help but wonder if they were right. Maybe I was the failure. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. I had time. I had vision. I had grit. And maybe most important of all, I had nothing to lose. So I stopped chasing their approval. I stopped trying to prove myself at every dinner table. And I started building in silence. I didn't know how far I'd go or how long it would take. I just knew one thing. If they were going to laugh at me, fine. But I'd make sure they remembered who I was. And one day, they'd have no choice but to see me for who I really am. There's something about family gatherings that makes you feel 12 again. No matter how old you get. That year it was Thanksgiving. My parents insisted on having it at Lauren's house. She just finished renovating her kitchen and wanted to host in style. Everything was magazine perfect. White marble countertops, gold fixtures, pumpkin-scented candles burning in every corner. Even the dinner napkins had our initials embroidered on them. Hers in gold, mine in a light beige you could barely see. I showed up on time, bottle of wine in hand, wearing a dress I had to save up for over 3 weeks to afford. I had just finished my second round of prototyping my financial app. I was exhausted but hopeful. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could finally share something meaningful about what I was doing. Maybe this year would be different. Spoiler, it wasn't. The moment I stepped inside, Lauren greeted me with a hug that felt more like a formality than affection. "Look at you," she said, stepping back to scan me from head to toe. "Still doing that computer thing?" That computer thing had just onboarded its first 200 beta users. But I smiled politely and said, "Yep, still doing that." Dinner started out fine. Everyone passed around the food and the usual small talk floated around work, holiday travel, the weather. But like clockwork, Lauren turned it into a performance. "So," she said, swirling her wine glass dramatically, "guess who got invited to the City Chamber's leadership brunch next month?" Everyone turned toward her. "I did," she said, flashing her teeth. "Apparently, they're highlighting women in business who are making real change. Real measurable impact." She said that while locking eyes with me. Real measurable impact. As if what I was doing didn't count. Mom clapped. Dad looked impressed. Even Aunt Sharon leaned in to say, "Lauren, you're just unstoppable." And then she went in for the kill. "You know," she said, looking right at me, "you should come too. Not as a guest, obviously. Maybe they could use someone to help with the tech setup. I mean, that's your thing, right?" The room laughed. I felt the heat crawl up my neck. I laughed too, just enough to not seem bitter. But inside something snapped. That wasn't a joke. It was a message. You're not one of us. You never will be. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to remind them that I wasn't some lost girl still figuring things out. That I had a vision. That I had built something from scratch while they were too busy mocking me to notice. But instead I sat there and quietly finished my plate. After dinner I stepped outside to breathe. I stood on the porch watching the neighbor's dog dig a hole under a tree. It looked free. Unbothered. I envied it. Lauren followed me out a minute later. "You okay?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "Yeah," I replied, staring ahead. She sipped her wine and said, "You know I'm just teasing. It's not personal. I just think you could be doing more with your life. More." As if the 12-hour days, the sleepless nights, the endless sacrifices I'd made to chase a dream they couldn't even comprehend weren't enough. I didn't respond. I just nodded and said I had to go. That night I drove home in silence. My apartment felt colder than usual. I curled up on the couch, still in my dress, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I thought about everything Lauren had said. About how my parents looked at her with pride and at me with quiet confusion. Like I was some foreign creature they didn't know how to support. And then, somewhere between midnight and dawn, I made a decision. No more trying to explain myself. No more hoping they'd see me, understand me, or, God forbid, respect me. They had written their narrative about me a long time ago. The oddball little sister who never quite got it together. Fine. Let them keep that story. I was going to write a new one on my own terms. And one day they wouldn't be laughing. One day, Lauren wouldn't be offering fake invitations to events I didn't belong at. One day, she'd walk into a room expecting someone else to serve her. And I'd be the one sitting behind the desk. She just didn't know it yet. After that night at Lauren's house, something changed in me. I didn't cry. I didn't vent to my friends. I didn't post a dramatic status or try to explain myself to anyone. I just got to work. I knew I wasn't going to win my family over with words. They had already made up their minds about me. I was the smart but weird one. The girl who could fix the Wi-Fi but couldn't get a ring on her finger. To them, success was something you could photograph, houses, weddings, vacations. Not code or prototypes. So I stopped trying to perform for them and started building for myself. My app, Sage Pocket, wasn't flashy, but it was useful. It helped older women track spending, manage medical bills, and understand financial documents with simple visuals and AI-powered explanations. I'd watched my late aunt struggle with money after losing her husband. She'd never learned how to manage finances, and the bank jargon made her feel stupid. That stuck with me. I didn't have funding. I didn't have connections. I didn't even have a full-time job. I picked up remote freelance gigs during the day and worked on Sage Pocket from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m. most nights. I couldn't afford a real office, so my kitchen table became mission control. My laptop was missing the T key. My coffee pot barely worked. But that kitchen? It saw the birth of something real. At first, I doubted myself constantly. I'd stare at my screen wondering if I was wasting my time. If Lauren was right, if I was just chasing fairy dust while everyone else moved on with real lives. But then, small wins started trickling in. I posted about my project in a few online forums. One morning, I woke up to find 50 users had signed up overnight. Then a retired teacher in Arizona messaged me. Her name was Judith. She said, "Your app made me feel smart again." Thank you. I cried. Not because it was a huge breakthrough, but because it was proof. Proof that I wasn't delusional. That what I was building mattered. I kept going. I learned how to pitch investors. Got rejected a dozen times. Then 24, then 30. Still, I kept going. I built partnerships with small nonprofits who served older women. I wrote blog posts. I posted tutorials on YouTube showing seniors how to use the app. I didn't tell my family any of this. I didn't want the eye rolls, the dismissive, "That's nice, honey." I wanted my work to speak for itself. Someday. Then, one quiet Thursday morning, something happened. An older couple in Walter Green emailed me. They ran a small community bank and saw one of my videos. Anne's mother had been scammed twice after her husband passed, and she was passionate about financial literacy for seniors. They believed in my mission. They invited me to lunch. At first, I thought it was just a kind gesture. But at the end of that lunch, Anne reached into her bag and slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a signed agreement, an angel investment of $50,000 in seed capital. No strings attached. Just belief. I remember gripping the envelope so tightly my hands trembled. I tried to keep it together, but Anne leaned in and said, "You're allowed to be proud, sweetheart. You're building something important." That was the first time in my life a grown-up, outside of school, looked at me like I was capable of greatness. With that funding, I hired my first 2 team members, a developer named Jaya and a UX designer named Eli. Both had backgrounds in nonprofit tech. Both had been overlooked, just like me. We set up shop in a shared co-working space. It was noisy and half the chairs wobbled, but it was ours. The next few months were a blur. We redesigned the app, launched a proper beta, and partnered with 2 retirement communities to onboard users. We even made a short video ad filmed on an iPhone in a park. By the end of that year, we had over 3,000 users. Not bad for a company no one believed in. Still, I stayed silent with my family. Not because I was hiding, but because I no longer felt the need to explain. At Christmas that year, we all met at my parents' house. Lauren bragged about her upcoming trip to France and her new luxury SUV. Mom kept asking me if I was still working with computers. I smiled and said, "Yeah, still building some things." That was enough. I didn't need to prove anything. I already knew. The seed I planted had taken root. The most satisfying part wasn't the growing user base. It wasn't even the funding. It was waking up every day knowing that I was doing something meaningful. That every line of code, every sleepless night, every rejection was leading somewhere. And yet, no one in my family knew just how far I'd come. Not yet. But they would. And when that moment arrived, I wouldn't need to raise my voice or seek revenge. I'd simply sit in the truth of what I'd built and let it speak louder than anything Lauren had ever said to me. Before we continue, if this story is striking a chord with you, if you've ever been underestimated or quietly worked towards something no one believed in, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more ahead, and trust me, what happens next changes everything. It had been almost 2 years since that Thanksgiving dinner, the night Lauren humiliated me in front of everyone. I hadn't seen her much since then. She was busy as always. Traveling, volunteering on school boards, organizing corporate events. Her social media stayed loud with curated photos of beach vacations, couples dinners, and glossy posts about grateful motherhood. But one Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw her name. But something curiosity maybe made me swipe. Her voice was different. Shaky. Flat. Like someone had let the air out of her. "Hey," she said. "You got a minute?" I paused. "Sure." There was a long silence, and then she sighed. "I don't really know how to say this. Things have been bad. Really bad." I stayed quiet. She went on to explain. Her husband, Mark, had been laid off 6 months ago. They kept it a secret, thinking it was temporary. But the severance ran out, the bills piled up, and then came the worst part. He'd been hiding a gambling problem. He drained their joint savings. Maxed out a credit card she didn't even know existed. The mortgage was 3 months behind. And just last week, she'd been let go from her own job during company-wide cuts. I don't even know where to start, she said, her voice cracking. I feel like everything's unraveling. And for the first time in maybe ever. I didn't hear Lauren the performer. I heard a scared woman. A sister. Human. Raw. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, now you know how it feels. I just listened. She ended the call with something I never expected to hear. If you know of anyone hiring, even part-time or remote, can you let me know? I told her I'd keep an ear out. And I meant it. Because despite everything, I wasn't heartless. A week later, it landed on my desk. Her resume. I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw the name. Lauren Evans. Applying for a role in operations support. She had no idea this was my company. The resume had come through the usual hiring portal, filtered by my HR assistant, who had no reason to connect the dots. She forwarded it to me for final review along with a note. Looks like she has decent experience. Worth an interview. I stared at that email for a long time. My heart raced, not out of anger but disbelief. Of all the places she could have applied, of all the companies she could have sent her resume to, she sent it here. To me. It would have been so easy to delete it. Or pass it to someone else. Or ghost her the way she dismissed me all those years. But I didn't. Instead, I scheduled the interview. With myself. No one else on my team knew who she was to me. I kept it professional. The invite simply read. Operations support. Interview with CEO, 11:30 a.m. Conference room 2. When the day came, I wore a soft gray blazer and kept my hair tied back. I looked different. Confident. Settled. Not the girl she used to pick apart. I arrived early, sat at the head of the table and waited. At exactly 11:29, the door opened and there she was. She stepped in with a tight smile, clutching a leather folder. Her hair was pulled up. She looked tired beneath the makeup, like someone barely holding it together. Hi, I'm here for it. She stopped mid-sentence. Our eyes locked. She blinked. Wait. You. I nodded slowly. Yes. Please have a seat. She didn't move for a second. I could see the storm in her face, confusion, embarrassment, panic, all crashing into each other at once. You're the CEO? Yes. I'm the founder too. She finally sat down, stunned into silence. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The power dynamic had flipped completely. She was in my space now. My company. My rules. I looked her in the eye and said calmly, so, let's talk about your qualifications. Lauren sat across from me, still gripping her leather folder like a lifeline, her knuckles white. I could see her trying to piece it all together, how the sister she once mocked was now sitting at the head of the table, holding her future in her hands. I didn't know, she finally said, her voice thin. I know, I replied, calm and steady. That's kind of the point. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the framed awards on the wall, the neat rows of productivity books, the sleek company logo etched behind me in glass, Sage Pocket Technologies. It was all mine. She cleared her throat and tried to recover. I saw the job listing online and I didn't think much of it. I was applying to a lot of places. I nodded. That makes sense. Operations is a good fit for your background. I reviewed your resume. Your experience is solid. Lauren blinked at me, unsure how to respond. She probably expected me to gloat, to throw every cruel word she ever said back in her face. But I didn't need to. Her silence told me everything I needed to hear. I'm not here to embarrass you, I said quietly. This is a real interview. If you'd like, we can continue. She looked stunned. You still want to interview me? I leaned forward slightly. You applied. I run a business. And you're here. So yes, I'll treat you like any other candidate. There was a long pause. Then, with a bit of effort, she straightened her shoulders and gave a practiced smile, one I recognized from years of holiday dinners and family photos. I appreciate that, she said. I've been through a lot lately. I'm trying to start over. And just like that, she tried to step back into control. The poised version of Lauren, the public relations expert, the high-functioning professional, was clawing her way back to the surface. But it didn't quite land the same way anymore. I opened her resume, even though I had already read it 3 times. So, you've got a background in event planning and team coordination. I began professionally. Tell me, how do you manage conflict between employees in a high-stress environment? She blinked. I think she was expecting me to ask something personal, something awkward. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about power. She answered a bit clumsily, stumbling over a few points. I could tell she hadn't interviewed in a while. Her confidence was cracked. We went through 3 more questions. I kept it polite, neutral, unemotional. And with each passing minute, the balance of power shifted further and further. She wasn't speaking to little sister anymore. She was speaking to a woman who had built something real, something respected, something that, whether she liked it or not, stood tall without her approval. Eventually we reached the end. Well, I said, closing her folder, I appreciate your time. She nodded stiffly. Thank you. I know this must be strange. It is, I admitted. But it's also full circle. She looked down, then back at me. I'm sorry. That caught me off guard. For what? I asked. For everything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I used to think I had everything figured out, that your way was foolish, that you were wasting your time chasing something that wasn't real. Her eyes were glassy now. But it was real. And now here I am, sitting in your office hoping you'll give me a chance. It would have been so easy to gloat, to deliver a well-timed line, to say, I guess the tables have turned. But I didn't, because I wasn't the same woman she used to tear down. I was stronger, quieter, sharper, and I didn't need to humiliate her to feel that strength. I appreciate your honesty, I said. And I genuinely hope you find the right opportunity to rebuild. Her face fell slightly. So this won't be here? I gave a soft smile. No, I don't think it would be the right fit, for either of us. She nodded slowly, shame settling in like dust. I walked her to the elevator. As the doors opened, she turned to look at me one last time. I always thought you'd end up alone, she said. But I was wrong. You built something I never could. I didn't respond. I just met her gaze, held it gently, and said, Take care of yourself, Lauren. The doors closed. And with them, the weight of years of mockery, comparison, and dismissal seemed to lift off my shoulders. Not because she apologized, but because I no longer needed her approval to feel worthy. After the elevator doors closed behind her, I stood in the hallway for a moment, completely still. My heart wasn't racing. My palms weren't sweaty. I wasn't angry or triumphant. I was calm, strangely deeply calm. I walked back into my office, closed the door behind me, and sat down at my desk. Everything looked the same: the books on the shelves, the framed photo of my beta launch team, the planner filled with to-do lists. But I felt different. Not because Lauren had finally seen me, but because I had finally stopped needing her to. I sat in silence for a long time, letting the weight of the moment settle. For so many years, I'd fantasized about how that confrontation would go. In some versions, I'd slam my hand on the table and list every cruel thing she ever said to me. In others, I'd walk into a fancy party and watch her jaw drop as I accepted some award. But the real moment? It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was human, quiet, honest. She saw me, not as her quirky sister with computer hobbies, but as a leader, a builder. A woman who had carved out a space in the world for herself. And I saw her too. Not the perfectly curated version she presented online, but the real her. Scared, tired, scrambling for stability. It didn't make everything okay, but it made everything make sense. That night, I went home and opened a dusty box from the top of my closet. Inside were old journals, notebooks, photos from college, memories I had tucked away during the years when self-doubt had a louder voice than self-belief. I flipped through one journal and found an entry from 6 years ago. It was dated the night of another family gathering, where Lauren had told a group of our relatives that, Emily's gonna change the world one broken laptop at a time. I'd gone home and written, Sometimes I feel invisible, like I'm speaking a different language no one wants to understand. But I know what I'm building matters. I know it. I just wish they did too. I ran my fingers across those words and whispered softly, You were right to keep going. For so long, I'd carried around the belief that I had to earn their respect. That someday if I just worked hard enough, I'd finally be accepted, celebrated, seen. But that day in the interview room proved something else. Respect doesn't come from others seeing your value. It comes from no longer needing them to. I didn't reject Lauren to be petty. I rejected her because I knew it wouldn't be good for her or for me. The power dynamics would be too complicated. The tension too deep. I wanted peace, not proximity. Closure, not chaos. And maybe, just maybe, that no was the most honest gift I could give her. It forced her to sit with the truth. It forced me to stand in mine. A few days later I got a letter. A real handwritten letter. Something Lauren hadn't sent me since we were kids. She didn't ask for another chance. She didn't defend herself. She just said thank you. Thank you for the interview. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for becoming the kind of woman I used to laugh at and now admire. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the same box as my old journals. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need anything more. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. The girl who used to flinch at family jokes now stood tall behind a CEO's desk. The sister once mocked for being single and poor had quietly built something lasting, something powerful. Not for validation but for impact. And for the first time in my life I felt light. No resentment. No lingering ache. Just a quiet, grounded peace. I don't know where Lauren is now. We haven't spoken since the letter. Maybe someday we'll meet again under different circumstances. Maybe not. But either way I know who I am now. And that's enough. There's a strange beauty in living your life without the weight of needing anyone's permission. After that interview with Lauren and the letter she sent, I felt something shift inside me. Not a sudden explosion but more like a steady widening light. Quiet. Grounded. Real. For the first time in my life I wasn't chasing anything. Not their praise. Not their attention. Not even their respect. I was just living. And loving it. My company grew. Not in a flashy magazine cover way but in a solid, sustainable way. We moved into a larger office space with natural light, and a kitchen that didn't require flipping breakers every time someone made toast. Our user base passed 15,000, and our partnerships expanded across 5 states. One of our early adopters, a woman named Darlene from Ohio, called into our helpline one day and said, "Your app saved me from losing $4,000 to a scam." I felt like I had someone looking out for me. That moment meant more to me than any award could. My team? They were like a second family. Jaya became my right hand, Eli handled everything I couldn't find words for visually, and we brought on 2 new interns, both women from underserved communities, both brilliant and determined. Watching them bloom reminded me of the version of myself that no one nurtured. And it felt good, really good, to be the kind of leader I once needed. Meanwhile, my personal life settled into something quiet and beautiful. I bought my first home, a modest, sun-filled place with hardwood floors and a cozy reading nook. No white pillars, no oversized foyer, just warmth and light and peace. Every Sunday, I lit a candle, brewed a pot of tea, and read for hours with no one to impress, no audience to please. I started gardening, of all things me, the girl who once killed a cactus. Turns out, watching things grow on your own terms has a kind of poetry to it. And the holidays? They changed too. I stopped forcing myself into family dinners where I felt small. Instead, I hosted quiet gatherings with friends who felt like home, people who listened without judgment, who cheered without competition, who saw me without having to be convinced. The first Christmas I skipped Lauren's house, my mom called, disappointed. "But it won't be the same without you." I smiled and replied, "That's the idea." It wasn't cruel. It was clarity. I had spent too many years sitting at tables where I was only tolerated. I wasn't going to do that anymore. Not for tradition. Not for appearances. Not even for blood. Because love without respect isn't love. And family without acceptance is just pressure in prettier wrapping. Of course, there were moments when the past still knocked gently at the door. Old memories. Echoes of comments. Photos from years ago where I'm smiling, but my eyes are dimmed. But those memories didn't own me anymore. Now, when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I was proud of. Not because I was perfect. Not because I won. But because I kept going. I chose growth over resentment. Purpose over proving. Peace over performance. And no one could take that away. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at a local women in tech conference. The organizers said they wanted someone who had built something from the ground up. Someone who knew what it meant to be underestimated and still rise. I stood on that stage, lights warm on my face, and looked out at a room full of women, some young and just starting out, others older and rediscovering their power. And I told them the truth. The world will tell you who you are if you let it. It will write your story in ink before you've even sharpened your own pencil. But you get to choose whether to live in their version or write your own. After the talk, a young woman came up to me, eyes shining. She said, "I've been trying to get my family to understand my startup idea for a year. They keep telling me to be realistic. But after hearing you today, I think I'm going to keep going." I hugged her because I knew that moment. I lived that moment. And I wanted her to know, you don't have to wait for the world to clap. Sometimes the win is simply not giving up. So no, I never got an apology dinner. No big family reunion where everyone finally told me they were wrong. But I didn't need that anymore. Because the life I built speaks louder than any sorry ever could. And this new normal? It's not loud or flashy. It's quiet, steady, and mine. Exactly how I want it. Sometimes I think about how different my life would be if I believed everything they said about me. If I'd let their laughter define my limits. If I'd accepted that being single meant I was behind. If I'd internalized every offhand comment that painted me as less than. I would have built a smaller life. A quieter dream. Something safer and emptier. But I didn't. Because somewhere deep inside, beneath the doubt, beneath the loneliness, there was a quiet voice. One that said, keep going. That voice saved me. And the life I have now? It's because I listened to it. I used to think power came from making people eat their words. From some grand, dramatic moment of proving them all wrong. And yes, I won't lie, it felt good watching my sister walk into that room and realize who I had become. But the real victory wasn't in that moment. It was in every small decision I made along the way to choose myself when no one else did. It was choosing to keep coding when no one cared. It was showing up every day to build something no one believed in. It was turning down the job applicants who once turned me into a punchline, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Power, I've learned, doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like peace. Like waking up in a quiet home that you paid for yourself. Like opening a letter from someone who once hurt you and feeling nothing but freedom. There's something deeply liberating about walking away from the need to be seen by people who never really looked at you. I think a lot of people, especially women, grow up trying to earn their place. Trying to be good enough to be invited to the table. We shrink ourselves to fit expectations. We dim our brightness so we don't outshine the ones who feel entitled to the spotlight. But the truth is, you don't have to wait for permission to take up space. You don't need validation to be valuable. You can build your own table and fill it with people who see you as you are, not as who they wish you were. My sister and I? We haven't talked since the letter. And I'm okay with that. Some relationships are meant to teach you how to love from a distance. How to forgive without forgetting. How to move on without bitterness but also without guilt. She had her path. I had mine. And maybe we were never meant to walk them together. But I hope, wherever she is, she's finding her own version of truth. Her own quiet rebuild. Because everyone deserves that. Especially the people who finally learn how to stop performing and start healing. As for me, I still keep that old journal in my nightstand. The one where I scribbled my fears, my doubts, my lonely victories. Some nights, when the world feels too loud or my confidence wavers, I pull it out and read the words of the girl who started this journey. The one who kept showing up even when no one was clapping. And I whisper back, you made it. We made it. So to anyone listening who's been underestimated, mocked, or pushed aside, this is for you. You don't have to shout to be powerful. You don't need to win their approval to win your own peace. Just keep going. Quietly. Boldly. Unapologetically. One day the ones who laughed will sit across from you, not recognizing the force you've become. And when they do, you won't need revenge. You'll already have everything you ever needed because you built it yourself. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful journey. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated and how did you rise above it?